Over the weekend, Donald Trump did exactly what any advantageous politician would do, taking a crisis and attacking it with controversial remarks and what some might consider fuzzy facts. But as it has been with any number of politicians over the generations, a little screaming doesn't hurt when the opinion polls are taken. And the attacks in Paris and Mali, the continuing discourse over Syrian refugees, and attacks seen as partisan shots from the left have all ended up giving the Donald another push upward in the numbers. Let's dig behind the digits. Welcoming the nationally syndicated columnist, author, political analyst, and veteran reader of such polling tea leaves, Matt Towery, joined by director of the Monmouth University Polling Institute, considered by many as one of the best in-depth tracking services in the country, Patrick Murray. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us. Let's get right into the numbers. And Matt, everything that I just talked about, in many cases would certainly tell people that any candidate would go down in the polls, but Donald Trump did it all, and he still goes up. Do we just have to realize right now that he is inevitable?
Well, not inevitable. In the past, I was involved in some of these presidential campaigns, and I know what happens when these TV ads
I'm so glad you said that out loud, because I wanted to make sure that I stuck that in there, because a lot of people are using that word right now.
Yeah, that's right. The television ads are going to start running. And when those ads start running in some of these states, Trump is going to take a lot of licks. I mean, we already see the establishment putting together a pretty good attack on him. But right now, he's accelerating his lead for the very reason that we thought he would be strong a year ago. He appeals to the populist side of the Republican Party. He's bringing new voters who are interested in. And Trump is a real force to be dealt with. I mean, some of these new polls we've seen just today in the last few days have him up in double digits in virtually every single state.
Patrick, let me speak specifically to a recent ABC News Washington Post poll, and this comes down to trust. Let's face it, we all want to trust our politicians one way or another. This one says, without a doubt, on the economy, immigration, threat of terrorism, and tax policy, they trust Donald Trump. This despite the fact that he has said some fuzzy comments here in the last few days. What does that tell you?
Yeah, I mean, particularly on the Republican side, there is a core group of voters who are just simply had it with the leadership in their own party. And I think that's what's driving this Trump phenomenon. And the more that he makes these perceived missteps, which those of us who have followed these races all along, and like Matt, who has worked in these races all along, say, oh, this could kill a candidate, has only made him stronger, because it's actually playing into this kind of rejection of the political establishment that we're seeing among about a quarter of Republican voters.
But Patrick, what about that specifically? Because if you look at one instance, and that was when he said that he saw thousands of people, hundreds, whatever the number is, people in Jersey City cheering on the 9/11 towers falling. There are newspapers, media outlets in New Jersey that say that absolutely never happened. He said that it did. Others say that it did. But what does it tell you then when something like that comes out? He says it and people say, not true at all.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because I'm from New Jersey, and I was here on 9/11, and a lot of people have taken great umbrage at Trump's remarks. But why is Trump not losing support when he says these things? Because the actual facts don't matter. It's the underlying truth that his supporters feel that he's telling. And the more that he does that, the more they say, yes, this is exactly what I was looking for in a candidate. Somebody who's able to tell the truth, even if the actual facts don't add up. It's the kinds of things that get under people's skin, and that's what he's doing well.
Matt, let's look at the other side of this as well from the other candidates. Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz look like they are threatening to overtake Ben Carson in the poll. CBS News poll says, quite frankly, they're moving up. Is this just people now listening to Dr. Carson? He's made so many mistakes. Matter of fact, he even talked about Thomas Jefferson crafting the Constitution over the weekend, which never happened, that people are finally starting to catch on.
Well, I think so. The other problem, and Patrick is dead on in his comments, that because of what has taken place with regard to Paris and the extension now to Belgium and even some alleged threats in the U.S., because of that, Trump and his statements about immigration months ago are resonating with these voters who Patrick describes well. Carson wasn't on that mission as much, and as a result, he's not the beneficiary of any of this. So when you have this separation of voters who are strongly in the Trump area, I would argue they're growing a bit. I think the evidence is there. The default is not necessarily going to Carson now. It's going to other candidates who perform well in the debates, that primarily being Ted Cruz. and Marco Rubio.
You mentioned Ted Cruz, and let me stay with you for a moment here, Matt. Do you see Ted Cruz, though, as the one with all the numbers that we're talking about? He seems to be on a very steady growth, and it would seem to be that he is on track, in many opinions, to capture that evangelical vote that is very important. And if Ben Carson leaves, would you guess that evangelical vote goes right to him?
I would, and in fact, if Trump stays this strong and we get through Iowa and New Hampshire, you come down to South Carolina, which is certainly the first symbol of a southern state, and then you skip just a little period of time and you get into these so-called SEC primaries, all southern, all in the southeast, out to the southwest, all of which will be apportioned, so no one will be a winner-take-all. But my guess is you would see Ted Cruz take a lot of the vote that, say, 8 years ago we saw taken by Huckabee. And if that were to take place, and then Trump taking the populist vote, there's not a whole lot of room for anyone else other than one quote-unquote establishment candidate who right now would look like being Rubio. So I would say right now it's Trump, Cruz moving up, and Rubio, who look like they're going to be the survivors to the Florida, right now, and this is very early on, to the Florida winner-take-all primary, which is going to be really the major decider, I think, once again, in this presidential cycle.
Patrick, I only have about 30 seconds left. Do you agree with that? And is there one candidate? And even that, what would you say to the one candidate that's looking to puncture that Donald Trump bubble?
Yeah, I agree that there are three tracks here. One of them is the evangelical track. Carson is losing that to Cruz. There's the populist track, and Donald Trump has that locked in. It's the establishment track that looks like Rubio is doing well. I think, though, that there could be an upset in New Hampshire. With a potential for Kasich or Bush to come out of New Hampshire ahead of Rubio, which means that it's going to be Rubio and that candidate, whoever that candidate is, battling it out in Nevada and South Carolina, and then heading into Super Tuesday. So right now it looks like Rubio has the upper hand, but I'm not sure who that third candidate is just yet.
We got a ways to go, and the numbers get more interesting every day. Matt Towery, Patrick Murray, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. We'll speak again soon. Now, a simple question with no simple answer. It's coming up next on Hardline.